for me, one of my big takeaways is the power of calling on angels and praying and asking for God to send angels when we need them. It just is the most powerful mom tool that I have now. You said that sometimes when you ask people if they've had miracles, they're like, no, I haven't, right? But I recognize miracles, and I don't know if I always did, but we had in our family an experience that was like an undeniable miracle. My son, who was 16, he loves cars and races and stuff, and he wanted to go down and see the beginning of the Baja 1000 in Mexico. And we lived in Southern California at the time, and we were like, no, we're not gonna go there right now. It's not gonna work. Right. It's kind of sketchy right now. Yeah. And he's very persistent, and I should have maybe been a little more aware, but I wasn't. But he basically told us, okay, well, I'm gonna go on a scout camp out with my friend's scout troop. And we're like, okay, that sounds great. And my husband called that scout leader and just kind of confirmed with him. And he was going to Joshua Tree, which doesn't have great reception. So he's like, you probably won't be able to call. I'm like, okay, it's fine. So the next morning, November 11th, I had a pretty normal morning, right. But I had this impression that Devin, that's the name of my son, was in danger. Something was wrong. And I was like, wow, okay. And I did all I could do at that moment, which was pray. And I remember praying and asking that he be safe. And when I ended the prayer, I did not feel better. And I was like, okay, what is going on? And I had this very distinct feeling that I was surrounded by evil, and almost like evil people. And I'm like, what is happening on this scout camp out, right? I was very confused. But I prayed again, and this time in my mind, I was just like casting out evil. I'm like, just cast out any evil that's around him. I don't know what's going on, but help Devin. And I ended that prayer, and I still did not feel good at all. And I'm like, I prayed again, and I asked that angels surround him, and also that angels could help him see what he needed to see to get out of the situation. After that prayer, I felt better. I was like, okay. And I was able to just go on with my day like it was not a big deal. And it was a school holiday, so my youngest two boys were home, and they were kind of needing my help. And we were supposed to go to Chuck E. Cheese with my youngest and his friend, and we were preparing to go to Chuck E. Cheese. And finally we got in the car to go. And it kind of got pushed back a few times, but finally we get in the car to go, and we had just left our neighborhood when I got a call from my husband. And he's like, do you know where the passport is? Devin is in Mexico, and I need to go get him. And I'm like, wait, what are you talking about? Wow. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, the Mexican police called, and I'm heading home right now to get the passport. And I'm like, I was so confused. We both were confused, right? Yeah. And I guess when the police had called my husband, he thought it was a scam at first. And he's like, I don't believe you. He's like, let me talk to Devin. And when he talked to Devin, Devin sounded not like Devin, really? Probably because he was in shock. Yeah. But then Devin said, no, Dad, it's me. Then Rob was like, oh no, it really is Devin. Yeah. So I turned around and went back home so I could find the passport, and I got some, did all the things, got car insurance and found the extra key for our son had taken the Xterra down, so found that extra key and made snacks for my husband, just kind of got stuff ready for him. And he got home and basically was kind of filling me in with what he knew, which wasn't much. But he did say they're going to take Devin to bring him the tourist place. But it closed at 7, and Rob wasn't going to get there by 7. And so then I'm like, okay, what can I do? And I prayed, and to my mind came, we had a friend whose son had just returned from that mission. So I called that dad of that son, of that boy. And then my other friend works in Tijuana sometimes, so I called her. And then I'm waiting for them to call back and getting my husband sent off. And then my friend who works in Tijuana called back and got some details. And she's like, okay, let me see what I can find. And within probably 10 or 15 minutes, she had gotten the phone number of the missionaries in Ensenada. And I'm like, okay. So I called them and I'm like, okay, my son's at the tourist department. Can you go pick him up? And they were like, yes, we can. And they were able to go do that. It's funny because later we found out that morning when they had gone shopping for their food, because they'd go shop for their food every day, they had felt inspired to get extra chicken that day. They were like, yeah, we need extra chicken for some reason. And then they were able to feed Devin. I mean, that was one of the many, many miracles that happened this day for Devin.
So the miracles were connected to more than one person.
Yes.
You do this, you do that, you do this to try and help pull us together.
Exactly.
Wow.
So many people were part of this giant miracle, which, Rob went down and he got Devin from the stake center because the missionaries had fed him. And they had to spend the night there because by the time Rob got there, it was probably 8 or 9 at night. And the car that Devin had been impounded. Now, I, at this time, thought maybe he had gotten mugged. I had called him when he was at the tourist department to tell him the missionaries were coming to get him. I said, what happened? And he's like, I'll tell you later. He's like, my feet are cut up. I'm like, how are your feet cut up? You know, I was so confused. So my husband gets to him and he brought him to the hospital to get his feet cleaned up because his feet were all cut up. And then he told my husband what happened. I spent that evening just talking with friends and trying to figure out what happened, but really just being grateful that Rob was able to go get him and he was safe. What had happened is he had lied to us about going on this camp out and decided to go down to Ensenada to see the start of the Baja 1000 by himself because none of his friends would go with him. He asked his friends and they were like, no, that's not a good idea. We're not going to do that. And when he got down there, he realized he didn't have enough money to get back home. And so we had a GPS unit. And so he's trying to sell that on the street. And some people were like, oh yeah, my friend, I think this guy said, my friends will buy that. Here, come with me. And he lured him down this alleyway. And then these guys jumped out with knives and grabbed Devin and brought him into a shack. And they stripped him down to his underwear and tied him up. And they asked him, where's the car? What's your ATM number? Just all these things. They got all these details. Well, the thing that Devin said, he noticed as they were pulling him into the shack, he saw this crack by the door. And he thought, I can break out through this crack area by the door. Yeah. And so while they had him tied up and blindfolded and all these things, he said he just knew that he could break free. Okay. And they ended up leaving him alone to go and try and get the truck and use the ATM card and all of that. So after they left, he got himself untied. And he actually made a comment. He's like, they weren't very good kidnappers because they just used bandanas. They didn't use zip ties. So he got himself untied and he, saw that crack again. And he's like, okay, I'm just going to bust through the wall. He's like, I think if I hit it a few times, I can bust through the wall. Well, the first time he hit it, he bust right through the wall. And he was out of the shack. And there was a guy standing on a building nearby, and he started yelling something. And Devin didn't know if he was yelling, quick, he's getting away, or if he was yelling, run for your life. He didn't know. So he just booked it down this, dirt road that had glass and rocks and stuff. And this is how his feet got all cut up, because they had taken his boots off. And as he gets to the end of the street, a city bus pulls up, just as he's getting there. And he's like, stop. And he gets on the bus. And mind you, he's this white kid in underwear, right, running down the street. And the bus driver had a pair of pants he gave him. So he gave Devin this pair of pants. and then drops Devin off at like the city like bus depot, you know. And when he gets off the bus, someone's like, oh, there's an American couple over there at the Chinese food restaurant. They're like, go over there. And so he went over there, and this American couple who knew Spanish called the police, and they were able to translate for the police when they came. And the police came, and like an ambulance came and cleaned up his feet somewhat. They gave him a pair of shoes and a shirt, and then that's when the police called my husband. I mean, so many miracles that allowed Devin to be saved.
Right.
From this potentially, I mean, it wasn't a great situation, but it could have been so much worse. I think what brings to mind is that there's angels, both earthly and heavenly, that are anxious to help us.
Yes. And
especially when we, like for me, when I prayed that morning, I knew something was up, but I didn't know. I couldn't have even guessed, right, what was really happening.
That's right.
And just by praying and asking for angels to help Devin in that moment, because I couldn't be there and because I didn't know what was going on, that they then, I think heavenly angels for sure helped him and protected him, and then earthly angels along the way.